What's up, guys? Episode 8 of the Troponin episodes. We are both officially on the rebound, and we want to talk about a couple of the issues that come up on the rebound that are going to make it either more difficult or easier to train. Big thing Dave's been dealing with is TFL strain. You can kind of talk about how that happened, and I'll talk about my 2 cents of why and all of that too.
For the people listening, TFL stands for this fucking leg, I think.
Exactly. I was gonna say toe fungus liquor.
Yeah. It's Latin. It's tensor fascia lata. It's the muscle that connects your IT band to your hip, basically. So it's involved, or gets a little too involved in a lot of quad movements. So
it also acts a little bit as a rotator.
Yeah. So yeah. Long story short, I had a little. I won't call it a tear. It's not serious enough to call it that. But it was like a strain about 6 weeks out from the last show, which puts this at like 2.5 months ago, which pisses me off saying it because I didn't think I'd be dealing with it this long. Basically, I rushed some warm-ups and I went for a weight that I shouldn't have in training. And I mean, every part of training up until that point was going amazing. I was hitting PRs. It was on hack squat. I was hitting PRs on it every week, linearly throughout prep. It was awesome until it wasn't. And yeah, I had this little strain and like it looked kind of dramatic. I put a video up, like, I mean, I just kind of bail on the weight and you see my legs shoot out. And it's something that's happened a few times before, and it's kind of a pattern. Basically, I stand too wide, my feet are kind of like splayed out a little too much, and Danny could probably go into the mechanics a little bit better than I can, but if you got too wide a stance and your pelvis is a little bit too tilted, it just puts a lot of strain on this little muscle at the top of your hip that you never really think about until you strain it, and then you're like, fuck, this is like a really vulnerable area.
I'm going to back you up because not everyone is going to have that happen if they get too wide. Dave is talking from his anthropometrics,
Yes.
his structure. He has really wide hips. His hip angle is really, really anteverted. So for him, like this is, so he'll say like, yeah, if you get really wide, this is going to happen.
Okay,
that is not the case.
Not if I get really wide.
Yeah.
That,
yes,
okay.
more accurate. So if you need to go wide, go wide.
Dave's built like a draft horse.
Pretty much. Yeah, or a centaur.
Centaur.
There was a joke at the gym we trained at in Kansas City where they'd look at Dave's legs and just call him canned hams.
Where do centaur women, where would they breastfeed? Like here or the...
This is like the question of does a giraffe wear a necktie down here or up here?
I thought that's been solved.
I mean, I'm pretty sure it's lower.
Yeah, yeah. Because
yeah,
otherwise it won't fit under like the shirt collar.
Exactly. These shirts they make for giraffes.
Obviously.
They're hard to get.
I'm so glad we're on the same page.
All right, so yeah, that's been bugging me. It doesn't impact a lot. That's part of the reason I switched from conventional pulling to RDLs, and I'm still doing that because I do feel a little bit off the floor because you need to push your quads a bit off the floor, and then any kind of quad training has been compromised anywhere from a little bit to a lot. Like there are certain movements I can do just fine, like a good hip press or like the Cybex squat press, any leg press. Single leg press. Yeah, basically a leg press that moves in an arc and deloads at the bottom a lot where the injury is most vulnerable. Those are doable to at least a degree. And then like if I do a decent amount of reverse banding on a hack, that's doable. But before I was doing a hack with no reverse band, which was awesome for quad growth, but that's kind of a no-go right now, and I'm pissed off about it. I'm hoping I can get back within a few weeks to like truly productive quad training.
So I want to pull back and give a little bit of a timeline here because this hasn't followed exactly the trajectory that I would have expected either, but I think there's a really good reason for it. So, and I think we've talked a little bit about this, but as fatigue accumulates during prep, a lot of times what happens is systemic fatigue accumulates and the ability to stabilize small muscle groups across very, very mobile joints to take a lot of load decreases. Like it's one of the hallmarks of fatigue is decreased coordination on small stabilizing muscle groups. When you're lacking the small stabilization, you're also going to get decreased output. So that's part of why when people are like, yeah, something feels like just not quite right in my hip, I can't get quite the right, push out of my leg. That's part of the reason. So over time, because Dave is built like a draft horse, as he got more fatigued during prep and he was doing really, really heavy leg pressing, he'd take his stance from here, which was already wide, and he'd go like way, 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 way wider. Which is going to put his hips at a completely different angle. But he was doing it in search of stability. Even before this happened, I remember telling him, like, dude, you look like you really widened out your stance. And then, like, 2 weeks later...
Well, part of that was deliberate because I figured a wider stance would give you more adductor, and I've got long femurs, so my adductors...
Yeah, because your adductors are so small.
It can always be bigger.
But I thought that, 2 weeks after his show, or even like a week after, he'd be feeling a lot better, just as hormone levels kind of restabilized, estrogen leveled out, he got more water and glycogen around the joints, things like that. But one of the contributing biomechanical patterns that has also historically for him created problems in this tissue is when he stands, and I could take a picture of him, he literally stands with his hips like jutted forward, like totally flat feet, hips are internally rotated, pelvis drifted forward, he's like total sway back, and it puts his pelvis in a position where TFL has more kind of a baseline level of tension. So if we take that and we combine it with the fact that Dave's particular nervous system is what I'm going to call a little bit more neurogenically sensitive, meaning when there's something that feels not quite right, his system is more sensitive to it. Justin, you're the exact opposite, to where you tear something and you're like, oh, weird, it's kind of bruised, I think I'm okay. And we saw that when we were dry needling you, where I was like, do you feel this? And you're like, yeah, I feel a little ache. My fingers are kind of moving a little bit. And I was like, I can hardly get the needle in. So just, it's really, really interesting to me how different people's nervous systems have a different, their barometer has a little bit different sensitivity. So some people like it's really, really stuck, and other people, you flip it just a little bit and the whole thing spins. And that's a huge predictor of how someone is going to come out of injury. There are a lot of things that influence that. Even things like positive thoughts can have a big, big, big spin on that barometer. So anyway.
Is that why Dave was chanting, I'm good enough, I'm smart enough? Oh God, people like me.
He rocks back and forth when he does it, though.
Yeah. It seems like the crying wouldn't be very positive, but I don't know. I guess
it's cathartic.
So we take his baseline biomechanical pattern combined with his neurogenic tendencies, and then on the rebound, his weight has climbed so much that his body habitus has thrown him into more of that pelvis position. So as he's standing during the day, or walking, or doing anything, his kind of KPI or key performance indicators, he gets a low back pump. He knows when he gets a low back pump, his pelvis is in a position that's not helpful for him. And he's been noticing more and more of that of the rebound.
Well, especially 2 weeks of like walking around airports and carrying bags and shit around, that didn't help.
And one thing I've noticed is, like, if you listen, like, we looked at his breath quality, and how even when pelvis position changes, neck position changes, and his ability to breathe.
I sound kind of nasally.
Not only nasally,
Dave's thick right now. I can vouch for Dave's size right now. Dave's really wide.
But I think that has contributed to continuation of his pain pattern, because he's never able to fully offload that tissue. So
that's why I keep shifting in this video, if anyone's wondering, because I'm in like a stool that's like not quite low enough, not quite high enough.
So the way we're managing that is, I mean, he's got a couple things he can do during training, but like, quite frankly, I told him, I've done some dry needling on him and it's been really helpful. I dry needled him on Saturday, but I was like, he doesn't need this right now. And I took him through just a couple minutes of correctives where literally all I did was make his body reference certain parts, like his heels and his low back flat on a wall. And he retested his squatting and was like, oh wow, actually that doesn't hurt anymore. Mm-hmm. And so really what I'm having him do, and what I have a lot of my clients do online, is like, you have to learn to reference different patterns. And usually it comes down to kind of offloading whatever pattern is driving your pain pattern 18 hours of the day, or 20 hours of the day that you're not training, not doing something else. You have to be conscious of how you're spending your time. And it doesn't have to be a one-to-one, like, for every hour he's in a bad position, he doesn't have to spend an hour in a great position, but he has to be able to remind his nervous system and kind of offset that body change. But the rebound, and we have a mutual client who was about ready to graduate from PT, and I was like, homie, I don't think you're ready, because when you start rebounding and your body position changes, your lifting mechanics are going to change, and I'm not comfortable letting you go yet. So rebound's always really interesting, because you see injuries pop up and people assume they're going to start feeling a lot better, and they do. They've got more glycogen, they've got more water around their joints, they're stronger, but they're also in totally different biomechanical and motor patterns, in a way that isn't always advantageous.
Yeah, I've kind of wondered if this would have happened to some degree anyway, later in prep or in the rebound, if I wasn't careful about it. Because I mean, even leading up to that, like I've had this basically same injury three or four times. Yeah, it's always the same thing. It's always the same thing, and it always takes like 8, 10, maybe 12 weeks to fully heal. But I could kind of feel, you know, in both hips, even like the TFL, like I wouldn't even say it was painful, but you feel a little bit of sensation in some area where you don't usually feel sensation. You're like, with enough experience, you can say, if I don't manage this, this is going to become a problem. So yeah, I do kind of wonder that if it hadn't become a problem in prep, if you know, I would have strained it by now in the rebound, not if I wasn't careful about it.
I think the rebound is one of those times that people either do great or it's the time they're going to be most likely to get hurt because they're feeling really good. I'm sure you've seen that all the time.
Yeah, oh yeah.
This is a good question for you, Justin. I think you've often said that you'll say that like with a good rebound, you'll be hitting PRs inside of 4 or 5 weeks, and you'll be like the biggest you ever have been. But you've also said that it doesn't strictly matter exactly what you do in training as long as you are training reasonably hard and stimulating the muscles somehow. And I'm almost wondering if like people, even with your aggressive rebound approach, if it would just be beneficial to just be extra cautious during this time. Like the time to let your form get a little bit loose and, you know, go for the heaviest lifts might be a little bit later in the off season, whereas the rebound might be a good time
I think
to get extra strict weekend.
I think it changes as like depending on your size. Like someone your size, 270 pounds at 5'9". How tall are you? Yeah, I mean that you're so thick and so full that with all that extra glycogen and water, I think the rebound isn't necessary. I mean, you're probably strong as hell, but I think like I noticed the really large people. It seems like their best lifts are very early in a prep. You know, you start prep at 16 weeks out, like 16 through 12, because you're still full, you still got all the muscle, but you lose a little bit of the extra bloat, and you almost have a little better mobility. It's kind of like how a lot of the super heavies in powerlifting aren't good deadlifters. It's like you almost get too tight.
Yeah.
And so, but then like the littler guys, because they're littler, they don't have all that compression, and then in the rebound they do. It seems like they get their best lifts there. But as far as I used to actually recommend really high volume in the rebound, and I've kind of gone away from that because for a number of reasons. One, I don't like to like force training styles because I think that like with the diet, the best diet is the best diet. You know, you can pick the food you like, but the best macros and stuff are the best macros. You can't skirt that. But training's different. There's a lot of emotion involved. There's a lot of, you know, I like to lift heavy. Someone could give me like a flex wheeler workout or a really high volume workout and say, scientifically, we know 100% this is the best way to train. And it may be, but I want to get the best workouts because I want to have fun. I want to enjoy the workouts. You know, so I really try to give a lot more leeway. But Paul Barnett, on YouTube, Anabolic Bodybuilding, he goes the straight volume approach, especially through his rebounds, but really most of the year. And I used to kind of recommend that more for the rebound, but I've kind of gone away from that just because I think the best training is the type of training that those when you're really enjoying training, and it's kind of silly. People who don't train, well, most people listening to this probably do really love training, but this is something only people who love training would understand. Like before a big leg workout or a big back workout, like when you can't sleep.
Big deadlift day.
Yeah, you can't sleep the night before. It's like Christmas. You're so excited for it, you know. Well, if you were so excited for I don't know, like I remember a couple of times I had a big goal of hitting 500 for 20 on squat. Those would be those types of nights. Well, if I was supposed to do like some weird workout that wasn't heavy and didn't, I wouldn't be excited. I wouldn't have that same emotion. So I really kind of, but in all things being equal, I think you're coming out of a diet, your electrolytes are probably messed up. Who knows whether or not you're still dehydrated or not, even though you're full everywhere. Just because there's a lot of water in the body doesn't mean that your electrolytes are in balance. It's likely that the higher volume approach is better in the rebound, but I just don't like to really like force it because me personally, I didn't enjoy that type of training.
Yeah.
I reached out to Martin Fitzwater just to help me out with programming a little bit because I feel lost right now. Where like last off season, I spent the first half of it training for my first powerlifting back since tearing the adductor tendon, and then I went more bodybuilding, and I feel like I did not put on enough size this last year. Like my stage weight this year was only a little bit heavier than last year. I was leaner, but you see a lot of these other girls with the powerlifting who put on slabs and slabs of muscles. So I'm always really interested too in just like what really determines, obviously intensity is a driver, but like in terms of like the best way to hit the rebound, I'm always, I'm baffled.
Well,
I have no idea.
I think we've talked about this too. With women, it's kind of interesting and different because I would generally, for men, I would say, no, if you want to be the best bodybuilder, don't train like a powerlifter. And I would say, you'll find lots of powerlifters, heavily muscled powerlifters, but none of them are winning. Joe Lanier tried to do bodybuilding. He did well, but he wasn't, Larry Wheels did bodybuilding, didn't even break the top 15 at a national show. They're heavily muscled, but it's a different look. With women, that's not always the case. Jill Mills, there's a lot of really good female powerlifters and a lot of good female bodybuilders who train almost like powerlifting. And I think largely the reason is that, well, women have, I think, and this is a number, I don't even remember where I got this from, so hopefully this is true. Women, I believe, have 2/3 the muscle size or number of cells or whatever in their legs as men, and only 1/3 the number of muscle cells in their upper body as men. And then also with women, the way their hip structure is a little wider and their femur kind of comes in a little bit compared to a man. I think generally the powerlifting type movements like squatting basically is where I'm all focusing this on. Men, I think for the most part, it's rare you get a really good male squatter who's a quad dominant squatter. Like Kurt Kowalski is kind of really maybe Joe, what's his name? But Kurt Kowalski's really like the only really big squatter I can think that was like a real quad squatter. Look at like Ed Cohn was almost like you could see him. He could probably remove his quads and still squat 1,000 pounds.
Yeah. Well, I spent a lot of last off season squatting, and I was hitting big. Like I hit 315 for 15 at 140 something pounds body weight. I don't think my legs grew that much.
That's the thing. I would say like the average woman I think does better with powerlifting squatting, probably because their hip position and the number of cells in their legs. But that doesn't mean that all women will. And so you really, when we've talked about this, the difference between sarcoplasmic muscle and myofibril muscle, and bodybuilding is really weird because they have bigger muscles than powerlifters when they clearly don't have more contractile strength than powerlifters. And so it's hard to know exactly how much emphasis to put on one or the other. I preferred lifting heavy, and I think there is a benefit. I think there's a look. You look at a Branch Warren or a Ronnie Coleman, the people with a high percentage of myofibrillar growth compared to sarcoplasmic growth looks cooler, but that doesn't take away from the fact that the sarcoplasmic growth is a large proportion of what makes a bodybuilder look like a bodybuilder. And all you have to do is look at any powerlifter.
I'm excited to see what Martin kind of suggests or what he kind of comes up with, because he does have a little bit of that powerlifting background. And looking at how him and Branch train, like I just kind of wanted to see what they thought about things, and we talked about deadlifts. And I think that I talked about this with you guys. So they were both like, yeah, you move heavy things, you're going to get big. And I was like, that's kind of what that's how we all kind of think. So it's going to be interesting. Yeah, it'll be kind of cool. But I do think the rebound is one of those times where it's really, really cool to look at how different bodies respond differently. I don't know, like for volume, I can't imagine Dave running volume.
I hate high volume.
Yeah.
Training.
Well,
like you
volume
put so much effort into that.
And you can, like, I don't want to say this is a knock on Dave's physique because I had some of the same things, but you can see, like, what are volume muscles? Lats, arms, and what are strong muscles? What are where you just got to move weight? Glutes, quads, thick back, thick chest. Yeah. And Dave's got that in spades. And so that's a hard thing. That's the thing that I struggle with. I never really properly transitioned. I feel like I could have been a better bodybuilder. I did at the very end. Like, my lats really came up like the last year that I competed, when I finally accepted that I needed to be a pumper. I need to get a pump in the gym. But I feel like my leg size got held back in certain angles because I was lower volume. And I was lucky with arms that those were just big naturally. But you can kind of see, you can see across the board almost, like who like your quintessential sarcoplasmic pump bodybuilder, Flex Wheeler, Phil Heath, massive arms, not a lot of thickness. Who's your like quintessential heavy, like heavy strength power bodybuilder? Branch Warren, Ronnie Coleman. Branch Warren, tends to have weaker arms. but and it goes both. I mean, I'm totally going on a tangent here, but it goes both ways. And I was actually talking to Nate Mead about this. The Brant Warren was known for his conditioning. You could go pull up photos online of him hitting a rear double bicep, and you'll see his lower back wasn't that lean. It's like it's the coolest thing, and knowing like how certain things impact a look. Because Branch's ass was so big that the skin's pulled so tight, his ass always looks in shape, and his rectors and mid back were so thick. And I pulled a photo up for Nate from I don't remember what year, but you could actually see he still has fat on his lower back, but he looks inside out shredded because his erectors are so thick, the skin's kind of pulled tight, and his glutes, he's pulling the dump truck behind him. That skin is pulled so tight on his glutes. Where you think conversely, like a Jay Cutler, who's in equal condition or possibly even better, but he's got a smaller ass, tiny little butt, and and so it doesn't look as lean. And the same thing with his lower back. There's kind of folds on it because the skin's not just stretched so tight, even though his lower back probably has less body fat than Branch's. So there's really, it's a weird sport in that there's so much to take in that you can, like you can hide certain things. Because you can be shredded and have shredded glutes, and they'll look soggy if they're not big enough, if the skin's not pulled tight. And you can be slightly soft, but like Ronnie Coleman was never not going to have striated glutes. And if you look at some of the photos, like 2004, he didn't really have that striated of glutes, and his lower back had some thickness on it too. His glutes were just so big, you can have a balloon with a real thick wall, but if you blow the balloon up this big, it's going to thin the wall out, And so there's like so much going on. I'm totally on a tangent now, but
yeah, I want to go back circle back to you said the lats are a value body part too, but I remember your lats came up a ton when you trained DC style. Did they not?
No, that's a misnomer. When I did DC rows.
The Dante rows.
Yeah,
right?
yeah. The seated rope rows.
Okay.
But that year,
right?
Yeah, but I mean, like, what was your protocol there? Were you doing like 10 pumpy sets, or was it?
Well, this is really misleading, and I don't ever really want to talk about this because I don't want it to. Because I think DC training is a great training, and Dante's a great friend, and I think people benefit from DC training. And I think all things being equal, it's probably one of the better programs ever devised for the majority of people. But Steve and I didn't really do DC training that much. I shouldn't say this. We took the principles of it for sure, but we didn't, like in Project Super Heavyweight, we did DC training, but that just happened to be over like a short period where we were really just doing pure DC training. For the most part, we took a lot of the ideas of it, the Widowmaker set, training heavy progressive overload, and then did more of a bodybuilding split. But no, there was the time my back came up a lot. There was a period where and I 100% credit Dante with his DC rows because I think more than anything else, that was the only movement. That was the first movement that made me really learn how to contract my lats and build my lats, and I think that carried over to other movements. But I looked at some of my old Elite FTS logs at one point because you kind of forget. It's been so long. You think you remember what your training was, but you don't until you look back. But we would do. No, there was one time when we were trying to do 40 sets in 45 minutes for back, I remember. And we split the workout into like lats and thickness. But we would do I remember for a while we were doing 4 sets we do pullovers with reverse grip pull downs, a superset, 4 sets of that. And then I would do the DC Widowmaker, and I do bent over rows, and we do one arm rows, and deadlifts. But yeah, that's, and I've always been hesitant to say this because I don't want to I think DC is arguably the best general structure of a training program ever created, but I didn't really do it 100% all that long or that often.
Yeah. I've come to kind of a similar conclusion, and especially with how you organize the split. In general, I don't feel like the split is the important thing about a training program. I think it's more of just it's more like a logistical product of the work that you want to get in throughout the week.
Yeah.
With that being said, like a push-pull legs, I think becomes kind of limiting at some point, especially when you have, if your shoulders, arms, and maybe lats need to come up relative to the rest of you. And so I've deviated more and more to where it's I train 5 days a week, and rather than it being push-pull legs, it's more okay, this is more of a chest day with some extra side delts because I need to train those more. And this isn't just a pull day; it's more it's really like hamstrings and lats, and then I have another back day where I do more back work and some biceps, and so it's, you know, it always kind of morphs into that, and then it'll probably have to change. It's like, if I don't love having an arm day, but if my arms continue to lag to the point where they either, you know, prevent me from being as competitive as I want, or they hold me back, is like, if I turn pro and that's the knock on me or whatever, then maybe I'll have to throw that back in.
Yeah, that's like we should do a whole segment on that, because I think our whole video, that's like a really good point. Because you do push pull leg, and I think if you want to just add size, you want to say, I want to gain 40 pounds of contest weight this year. Push pull legs is what you got to do, because it gives you the maximum amount of volume and sets, and not just that, but the maximum amount of sets you get where you're not especially fatigued on chest, back, and legs. But like arms, I think, are like a volume body part. You can do 20 sets for arms. You're not getting 20 sets for arms in a week if you're doing push-pull legs, unless your workout's 6 hours long. So arms and then shoulders also, because I can do, you know, you can do 16 sets or 20 sets for shoulders in a workout. You know, if you really want to work on rear delts, you know, you're talking like, you know, 4 or 5 sets, two exercises of 4 sets for side delts, a pressing set, 2 exercises of, you know, 4 sets for rear delts. You're up there in sets. You're not doing that while also training chest and triceps in the same workout. So it's always a give and take. To add the size, you've got to hit the heaviest, the largest muscles when you're the most fresh and the most often, but that neglects the smaller muscles. But to bring up your shoulders and arms, there's no way you're going to get like legs and back with the same volume. And when I say volume, I mean like, because you can do a ton of sets, but the same volume where you're fresh and
I feel like the whole volume, like there's so many semantic issues when people start talking about volume, to the point where like any two bodybuilders could talk about volume and they're almost never really talking about the same thing. Yeah. But actually, I mean, I think even Dante himself would, well, I don't want to speak for him, might agree with a lot of this, because like I agree with you that DC was so great for gaining size, or a program like that, because you have so many opportunities throughout a week to progress your strength on big exercises. And Dante would always say, like, you know, if your quads are small right now and you're hack squatting 4 plates for 10 and you increase that to 6 or 8 plates for 10, your quads are probably going to be bigger. And you can apply that logic not in every case, but in so many cases that it becomes the most productive way to train if you're like a beginner or intermediate. But then you get to a point where like it hasn't panned out for everything. And so like, if you say arms are a volume body part, to me that doesn't necessarily mean that you need 20 sets per week or more for biceps and for triceps, but it might mean you need to train them when they're fresh, and you can actually get great output and get a decent amount of volume for them, and have that, like, your, you know, protein synthesis is only elevated for so long after a workout, right, in the muscles that you train. So if the only time you ever train your triceps is after you've already hit chest and shoulders, which are already stronger body parts, like, how much of those, say, 20 grams of contractile protein that you can gain in that next 24-hour period are going to go to your triceps versus you dedicated the entire day to arms? That's a big difference.
And especially, like, back to the volume, the argument is that, well, when I'm doing pressing movements for chest and shoulders, my triceps are getting work. But I would argue that they're not getting work to the point that you're creating a stimulus that's going to require new growth. So all you're doing is when you finally do hit triceps, you're hitting them where they're fatigued, but fatigued with like a sub-physiological level of fatigue, not enough fatigue to actually stimulate growth. So then you're forced to train them when they're weaker, and you can't create that as much of a stimulus with however many sets you get. Yeah, so it's tough. There's no perfect workout. I mean, and that's part of the fun of the sport, is that, you know, like you can devise a million different workouts, and everyone has benefits and you know, or pros and cons. Yeah, I used to like really kind of obsess about that, like learn what a person trained like, and kind of see what their body, you know, like you could see, you know, like Flex Wheeler. It's like, God, he's so round, so much sarcoplasmic growth. His arms are round, his delts are round, but there's something lacking in like the back thickness or chest thickness that's just different than Ronnie or Branch. But you take a Branch, he's like, God, he's so dense. He looks like he's made out of granite. It looks like you couldn't hammer a nail into him. But there's like something lacking with his arms, you know, like the, you know, or even his lats a little bit even.
Well, like, I mean, if any of you, like Dusty Hanshaw still does a lot of podcasts and stuff, so if any of you listening to him, you know that he's like the biggest advocate ever for DC training, and Dante himself trained Dusty, and he put on a ton of size using DC. But even Dusty will now say that if you look at the way he trains all of his different body parts, there's kind of a little bit of everything. Like, he's known for having a huge back and kind of a grip and rip it style of training where he does like absurdly heavy deadlifts and rows, and it's worked out really well for him. But he'll tell you like his arms or his biceps at least didn't grow until he got way away from that style. Just for one example.
Yeah, so someday someone's going to invent the perfect routine that's the best of all worlds. But and it's hard though.
It's probably going to be AI.
What's that?
AI.
AI is going to do it.
Yeah,
It's going to be after
some bodybuilder nerd's going to get like just have some neural network running and analyzing. 16 years later, it'll be like print out the perfect workout. It'll be weird though. It'll be like you do like one heavy set of deadlifts at 8 a.m. on a Tuesday, followed by arms on Tuesday at 6:30 p.m. and
well, that's what Jared. That's like what Jared does.
Oh yeah, Jared Feather.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I've always wanted to talk with him about training too. He's fascinating.
Maybe we'll all have like, we won't really even eat food. We'll just like, it won't just be an insulin drip. We'll have like a nutrient drip hooked up to our body, and it will know exactly when each given muscle is ready to synthesize new protein.
Yeah, you'll just have a packet of
I've got a question for you, Justin.
like stuck in your stomach.
What's your favorite on the 5 high days with the cheat? What's your favorite cheat?
God,
because we already it's always hard when you're traveling because you're already out eating for meals and you just want to eat at home and cook something.
I'm really boring. Well, I have celiac. I didn't used to, but like there's kind of like I have like a couple of courses. Well, sushi, which is weird because I think I forced myself to like sushi because bodybuilders ate sushi at first, but now I really do absolutely love sushi. Good sushi is absolutely amazing. I met with some Jake, John, if you're listening, some guys some powerlifters, clients of mine that were at the Kalamazoo. We went out and ate sushi. I'm still full from it, actually. That was it last night. But Thai food, pad Thai or peanut curry.
Yeah.
Peanut curry. Oh man. And then you're kind of like American beer belly pizza or burgers and fries. Those are like wings, buffalo wings. That's pretty much the gamut of my cheat meals. Either pad Thai, peanut curry, sushi, gluten-free pizza, which isn't quite as good anymore. Burgers with gluten-free buns, same thing with fries, and then and wings. That's pretty much all I rotate.
I've got to decide what I want to eat tonight.
Yeah, I know.
I never do sweets. I never cook. I never have had a cheat meal that included candy, sweets, baked goods, cookies.
That's so weird.
I want the saltiest, fattiest meat you can get in front of me.
If I had my gallbladder still, I'd be going for bacon cheeseburger every night.
Oh man, that sounds good right now.
That's when I was in high school, actually, I'd go out with friends and I'd get a bacon cheeseburger with fries and a side of chicken tenders, and I'd eat all of it.
We said, she's really, really good at eating.
I think I wrote about it in my first comprehensive performance nutrition book, but for a long time, my go-to was McDonald's. This was before I had celiac, and I'd get the double cheeseburger. This was back when you could get a double cheeseburger, or was that for $1? I think it was a double cheeseburger.
Yeah.
And I'd buy 8 of them, and then turn them into quadruple cheeseburgers. You know, oh man! So I'd eat like 4 quadruple or whatever it worked out to be, and that was like I can still like that. That was my favorite cheat meal because it was all the
sounds really
barely legally allowed to be called meat you could have with all the barely legally allowed to be called cheese you could have crammed in one burger.
We love to cook too.
Yeah,
we both do, and so every time after
chicken was really good. I just want to.
What's that?
Dave's chicken was really good.
Oh, chicken I
grilled. Yeah, he's a phenomenal. We both cook a lot, but we hate every time we've had a show. Dave Smith will come home and eat like at our home where he can make everything he wants, and I hate traveling for shows because I want my kitchen where I can make the things I want. We're not like going out to a grocery store to buy the things you want for one day kind of thing. But
yeah,
before I want to tell everyone I ate way more sushi than Justin. When
you did.
Did you?
But if anyone's listening, I was the talk of Sakura last night for the amount of sushi.
Okay.
Wow.
So, but just to clear the air, the largest amount of sushi ever eaten by a human, I'm fairly confident, was Fuad Abiyad in 2015 in Metro Detroit after a seminar at Ken Jackson's gym. I have never. I want people to understand. I've never seen. He was prepping for something. He was working with John Meadows at the time, and it was his cheat meal. I've never seen anything like this in my life. At least 200 pieces, and most of them were nigiri. I think he ordered 50 pieces, 50 orders, so 100 pieces of salmon nigiri, and that was just part of the order. I mean, I can't do this justice because this was, like they bring those boats out, like there he
like it's like a whole boat,
but way more than a whole boat, like 3 boats. I mean, I was mesmerized. There was no way this had to be 35 pounds of sushi. That he fit all that into his stomach. Still to this day, I can't eat sushi without just remembering, because it was the whole table. It was just the sushi the salmon nigiri came out in a big plate like this, and it was just like 100 pieces of salmon nigiri, and then he got tuna nigiri. What's that?
He still ordered. Did he still order rolls?
Oh yeah. Yeah. He probably ordered 10 or 12 rolls. Probably like 20 or 30 tuna nigiri. Like 100 pieces of salmon nigiri. When I say 20 or 30, I mean 20 or 30 orders, like so 2 each.
So double that.
Yeah. The lady, she thought that was the order for the table, and she was blown away that was the order for the table. We had like 12 people there, but that was just and I was like, okay, his eyes are bigger than his stomach. He's gonna put down a bunch of this, get sick, and then maybe take some home, or just no. He just sat there. It was like, you ever see like when Homer Simpson goes to hell and they feed him donuts, and it just keeps going. That was it was just, and it never stopped. And I was sure he was going to rupture his stomach, because I just you watch like Joey Chestnut, like the Nathan's hot dog. And it's like, wow, that's amazing. That's probably 20 pounds of hot dogs. This was more food than that. It was. I've been around bodybuilders and powerlifters. I've done Bob Evans, at Elite, when everyone's trying to out eat each other. Nothing has ever come close to eating display.
That's actually really impressive.
Was he pretty close to the show at that point?
What's that?
Was he pretty close to the show?
He was in good shape, and actually, it was one of the best looks. I thought it was. He didn't think it was, and I don't remember how he ended up placing, but I thought it was one of his best looks he ever had.
I'm just wondering that if you're that big and you're that lean and you've been dieting for a while, if the gastric emptying is so quick that he had already truly digested some of it by the time.
It's very likely. And I used to say, I used to be convinced that if you put me in Nathan's hot dog eating contest at like 4 weeks out of a show, give me some insulin and some THC, I could win.
You'd be good to go.
Yeah,
that's awesome.
Actually, this kind of brings me to another question regarding cheat meals. So, I know you talked with, I think it was Fuad, that we already talked about him, about cheat meals, and I think he was kind of comparing your approach to Patrick Tuor's. And for anyone who doesn't know, Patrick is a great coach who's coached like James Hollingshead, Ian Valliere, a lot of these like really big dudes who have become even bigger and better under his guidance. And he's like completely anti-cheat meal. And when I say anti-cheat meal, like it's not, I don't know that he like cracks the whip on anyone who ever eats one, but he never recommends it. He'll never put it in the plan and say this will make you better. And his reasoning is just like, look, it's my job is as a coach just to tell you to eat the right things, and there's never a situation where, say, a burger is going to be better than steak and rice. So, and I think your feeling on that was more like, well, maybe that would be true if we were all robots, but we're not, and so we need some variety, more or less.
Yeah, I used to not have cheat meals. I used to not plan them for a while, for several years. And I would like kind of at the end of a contest, I would really quiz a client, like how many times did you break down? And every single one of them, at least late in prep, broke down almost once a week. Some of them would make it 2 or 3 weeks, but they were. And so finally, I was just like, they're not robots, and so I want to know what they're doing. They're not telling me this. They're cheating anyways. So now when I make my adjustments, thinking they ate the prescribed amount of food. And so I thought, so the way I kind of came down to it was like, okay, I'm doing these high days. These high days are already storage days. So like someone like your side, you're already getting like 40, 45 grams of protein and 125, 135 grams of carbs. You're already getting a large meal. So if you're eating a 1,000-calorie meal right from the get-go, and I replace it and I give you an optional cheat meal, and you eat a 3,000-calorie meal even, which is a massive meal, but it's probably not. It's probably like 2,000. You're getting 1,000 extra calories a week. Well, that's I know. But the problem is that I don't want the cheat meals to turn into eating contests. And so it's hard to say that because people start turning it into that. And it's not ideal. You're eating junk, so it serves a purpose in that I know when you're cheating. I know, and I plan for it and I account for it. And I put boundaries on it. You guys have never really had to because you've been able to get in shape. If someone's trending and we're reducing calories and carbs and fat to a point where we're 6 weeks out and your carbs and fats are lower than I want them to be, and we're struggling to stay on target, then I put limits on the cheat meal: 2,000 calories, 1,500 calories, 1,200 calories.
I think you've done that for
you like the last couple weeks
during Universe, and for both of us for our first show too.
Yeah. Was it the very end? Yeah.
But we were both on like no carbs and no fats.
But I guess so. I'm kind of wondering here. Like we talked, I think a week or two ago about what foods are really the best choices on a high day when you can technically have sugary carbs of a lot of different variety. What's really the best to eat? And we came to the conclusion like really it's still better if you stick to basically rice and some fruit and like still pick it, kill it, grow it foods. So when it comes to the cheat meal, do you see a commonality among the clients who get the best results who basically kind of stick within a narrow range in their cheat meals?
Yeah.
For example. Are they the ones who are more likely to eat like one burger and an order of fries, or like a fattier steak and a baked potato versus flank and rice?
Yeah, I mean you can't beat thermodynamics. You have to pay the piper. If you're someone who treats a cheat meal as I'm going to try to enter an eating contest, I'm going to eat a pound of deep fried butter. I can't coach that out of you. You're not a winner. I mean, to be frank, if I have to baby you and say, look, I'm giving you this free meal so you're on plan the rest, and my cheat meals are optional. You don't have to take them. Almost everyone does, and certainly late in prep everyone does. But you don't have to take them. But they're there because if I don't give them to you, you're having them. And people can say they don't, but I've eaten a lot of meals with a lot of contest prep bodybuilders who I wasn't coaching, and all of those meals were eaten at a restaurant that were clearly not on a diet. At every show I've ever been to, I've eaten dinner. You always go out with a group of guys, and a lot of them are in prep, and none of them are eating diet food. And so either it's happening. Where I would much rather plan it, but if I have to, and I don't always say this. I don't know because you guys, I didn't have to. You were powerlifters. A lot guys, people who I'm worried about it, I will say. With a cheat meal, I'll say, look, it's a free meal. You're off the diet. You don't have to, it's optional, but it's a chance to be a normal human. Take your wife to dinner, take a break from the diet, whatever you've been craving that week, get it out of your system so you're not craving it. So there's no excuse the rest of the week to stay on plan. But calories still count. If you go and eat, if you go and see if you can eat a pound of deep fried butter just to see if you can eat it without puking, you're not helping yourself,
Yeah.
So.
Well, I think we both too, we're probably a little bit weird during our cheat, so we're like, we don't think, yes, they're cheat, but it's really, there's a difference in verbiage between the cheat meal and a free meal. Just hearing those words makes it sound very, very different. And I think we both, even during our free meals, we're like, we want to make sure we're not.
We don't want to derail progress. And sometimes, one of my high days is on a Tuesday in the off season when I have multiple, and then my check-in is Wednesday. And so in the back of my mind, I'm always like, I don't. It doesn't matter that much, but I'm like, I don't want to look extra bloated for my check-in pictures because I don't want to throw things off. And I'd rather like my real meals stay as high as possible versus getting to be a glutton with whatever bullshit I want to eat on Tuesday night.
And even our cheat meals are pretty healthy. All through prep, we basically had the same free meal every week.
There's so much when you guys are home cooking, when you're cooking your own meal, there's only so much damage you can do. And I think we've talked about this, about me noticing the difference between my family and my wife's family. My family's much more overweight than my wife's family. And the real difference at family gatherings, all family gatherings revolve around food, where my food would be ordered pizza, chips and dip, where my wife's family would be homemade apple pie, cheese and crackers. But it's nothing, I'm a coach, we do check-ins. And so you even said, your first preps, we did put limitations on the cheat meal. And so if someone's going, it's, like you're not, you always have to pay the piper. If you're being stupid with the cheat meal, you're going to fall behind, and that's the change I'm going to make to the diet.
Well, I'm actually kind of thinking about this from an off-season standpoint too, and so, I mean, obviously calories still count, but it's a bit of a different goal here. So I'm wondering a couple of different things. So, like right now, I mean, I'm 4 weeks post-show, and so at this point, most of the gluttonous cravings are totally gone. I mean, they were honestly like 2 weeks, and especially I had a couple extra cheat meals like you predicted with Danny after her show, and now I'm just like really ready to be back on track. I'm like, okay, I have 3 high days per week. I really only feel the need to like eat something truly off plan on one of them, like on Saturday night with Danny. The other 2, I'm like, I'll eat a strip steak or a ribeye and a potato instead of chicken and rice. But if I'm already big and I'm trying to get even bigger and build my metabolism even higher, is it sometimes a benefit in that situation to actually go a little bit more nuts on the cheat meal? Is it really going to benefit you?
No, I don't think so. I really prefer to keep it as what you're craving. Because then it's just a meal to not have to be a bodybuilder. Like when people and I don't put limitations on it to start with, because people are like, tell me what to eat, and I'm like, well, if I'm going to tell you what to eat, I'm going to say eat on plan. This is a chance. This is, look, you got a girlfriend, you got a boyfriend, you got a husband, you got a wife, you got kids. This is you get 1 meal a week or whatever, however many you get, to not have to worry about it. If you are going to worry about it, then stay on plan. And right. I can tell you the best things to do, but I can't make you a winner. Like you just said, like you don't want, like it's like anything, like like going out and getting hammered is fun. Going on club and getting wasted with your buddies, yeah, it's a good time. But if you got to squat the next day, you pay the, it just is what it is. I'm giving you the option. It's an optional cheat meal. It's a meal to take your wife out for dinner so she doesn't hate you for being a bodybuilder. It's a meal to not count calories so you can just be a normal human for a few minutes. If you turn it into if you can't control yourself and you make it just an absolute garbage meal for when you don't even crave garbage, that's that's something I can't coach out of you. You're just not. Yeah. You're not to be mean, but you're just not a winner. And really the weird thing about being a coach is, for the most part, you're best at the reason like the coaches who work with the real top athletes seem to keep getting the best top athletes is because you're good athletes. It's a different coach. Is basically what I'm doing with my best athletes is keeping them from doing too much. Like Danny, like when you're week out, you want to do 2.5 hours of cardio a day, and we have to say harder isn't just better is better. And that's what you do, like as a coach with your winners. And this is like I don't want to sound mean because like everyone's got different priorities or whatever reasons for doing everything. But if you're the type of person who wants to be the best in the world at whatever you do, and that's just the absolute best I can be, I don't have to worry about those things. I'll give you the optional meal, and if I have to say, yeah, I mean, it is. I mean, it is what it is. But the type of person where I would have to put restrictions on the cheat meal, that's not the only cheat meal they're having anyways that week. They're not following the diet more.
Right. Well, on a similar note, I've noticed that the bigger I get and the bigger my metabolism gets and the more I have to eat, the less room for error there really is anyway. And it's not that like some of these foods still sound great, but I know that I'm probably not going to perform as well the next day if I eat pizza versus just eating some more steak and rice. I'm certainly going to be bloated, and if I'm training back or legs, that's not going to help me. Yeah. I'm going to be up like 5 pounds just because of the extra, I don't know, sodium, MSG, whatever. And if I've got to do hit cardio the next morning, I'm going to have a huge fucking back pump just from that. And like we talked about, that's going to impact things like my injury status. And so there's all these other things that come into play to where I'm like, it's not even worth it. I mean, I already had fun post-show, and now I'm ready to be on track and actually make progress.
I think the thing for me post-show is like just having the freedom to not have to be on eating 5 times per day. Like being able to be like, okay, like I had breakfast, oh, we're out of coffee, and like I want to, have a bite of something. Not feeling guilty for having like a bite of something. Like that's the biggest thing for me, because you spend, the 51 other weeks of the year being on point all the time with everything. And I don't realize that it's not that I want like certain foods so much as I just want the freedom to just have a bite of something when I want to have it,
It's just, It depends. All of it just depends on the person, and it'll be hard to like summarize this. And but like I haven't competed in years. I have no plans of ever competing again. My meals are still mostly meat and rice, steak and rice chicken. It's just like they taste good. I feel better. I sleep better. My work production, my job is better, and my training's better. So like, but the clients who ask me like, so could I eat? I just hit the macros, right? So if I bought like, like turkey, deli meat turkey, and it's like, yeah, technically, but you're not going to win the Mr. Olympia doing it that way. Like it is what it is. And so really the cheat meal came from the fact of, from probably like 2002 to 2008 or 9-ish, I would give them rarely. And it would be a special thing when like you could tell the client was really hurting. But after that whole time talking to clients, and I used to do like how I do the questionnaire, I used to do like a post-contest kind of questionnaire. And every single one of them would tell me a slew of cheats, And it's like, well, okay, if I break it down, you're cheating once a week anyways, only I didn't know when you were doing it. I didn't know so when you were giving me the check-in, I don't know that happened. I'm assuming the diet I gave you is what you followed, and you don't look that way, so now I need to change the diet, but I'm making the wrong changes. This is just a way to, and there's only so much you can do, because like your clients who aren't your best clients are still cheating even more than that. But I just kind of like acquiesce to the fact that it is what it is. Humans are humans; they're not robots. This is the best way for me to get as close to truly knowing what the client is doing. And there's still the thing that if you aren't on track, I put limitations on the cheat meal.
Yeah. When you first started talking about that, like a certain period of like 7 or 8 years, I thought you were actually going to talk about your own meals, because I've seen, I can't remember where, but you've written and you've talked about how there was a period of time where basically all you ate was like flank and rice and maybe like oatmeal for breakfast or something. But I even remember whatever you wrote, you also said like your idea of a cheat meal at that point was like, my wife made fajitas, so instead of having steak and rice, I had like tortillas
and steak.
Or I had like a wrap from some Mediterranean place, which is basically steak and rice and a pizza or something like that.
There's wraps. I think I had pickles in it. Yeah. But I mean, and that was actually like, I got two, like, like how you do in this sport. You're like, well, what's the best? And I was like, well, red meat's probably the closest to our amino acids. Flank is, a tasty red meat. Rice. And so I just kind of like, what we all do is we just kind of like go overboard with it. And I just pigeonhole myself into like, well, this is the best. So if I don't do the best, it must. It's akin to doing this. Yeah, it's akin to doing the worst. But yeah.
This is familiar.
Are you looking at me?
No. This is what this is exactly what I do.
Yeah.
And I do this with training too. It's funny how we talked about like there's no one perfect training split, and it'll probably change throughout time. And I know that, and I know my split might be different a year from now from what it is now. But whenever I'm thinking about a new one, I'm like, this has to be it. This is the one that's going to be the forever split. And that's just kind of how my mind works with a lot of things. And I have to take a step back and like, no, nothing is permanent, really.
I love that about you.
I think that's really
so like into things you do. It's so great.
This is really common in the sport, and it's probably not always for the best reason, but you see that all the time. I'm like, it's an obsessive sport, and it's a sport you can continually get obsessed and overanalyze, and it's like the type of person who's like almost OCD, hyper competitive, willing to do more than everyone else. Those are people who really thrive, or depending on what you call thriving, really immerse ourselves into it. And you can kind of get overboard with it, but there's worse things to go overboard on, I guess.
Yeah.
For more content like this, visit www.teamtroponin.com.
This video is brought to you by First Attachment Nutrition, battle-tested nutrition, expert formulated supplements. Join the First Attachment revolution.